This is Radio 84 MHz, broadcasting from the bustling streets and hidden alleys of Vietnam. You are tuning in to the frequency of inspirational stories and unfiltered vibes. I'm Mark, and today, my emotional frequency crashed. I always thought Vietnam's history began when we Americans arrived. I was wrong. 20 years of war is just a grain of sand in their 4,000-year desert. Today, in Hanoi, I experienced the biggest culture shock of my life, and I had to call my dad, a U.S. veteran, to apologize. If you are ready to join me in finding the truth about this country, hit that subscribe button right now. Hanoi always knows how to seduce me with its distinct scent, a blend of tropical rain mixed with the smell of opportunity. Standing on the terrace of this luxury bar, a glass of wine in hand, looking down at the city's glittering lights, I felt like a proud godfather. Surrounding me were young Vietnamese entrepreneurs. They were sharp. They spoke of NASDAQ, of AI, of million-dollar funding rounds. In my eyes at that moment, they were the greatest survivors of the 20th century. I had read the World Bank reports. I knew Vietnam had risen from one of the poorest nations to a middle-income economy in just a generation. I tapped my glass lightly, drawing attention. I wanted to bestow upon them what I thought was the highest compliment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice projecting confidence, "tonight I want to toast to your miraculous rebirth. Just 50 years ago, this place was the rubble of the world's most brutal war. But look at you now. You have risen from the ashes. Vietnam's greatest legacy is your ability to heal the wounds of war and become a new economic dragon. Cheers." I drained my glass, expecting applause, but the response was a polite, almost awkward silence. And then, Professor Hung, an elderly historian with piercing eyes, stepped forward. He didn't raise his glass. He looked at me with a gaze that was tolerant yet stern. "Mr. Mark," he said slowly, "you are suffering from the common Western ailment again." I frowned. "Excuse me? I was praising your resilience, wasn't I? The international press calls you a development success story." "You praise us because we survived the war with America," Hung replied. "You define our identity based on your relationship with you. Do you think Vietnamese history is a broken road that was reconnected in 1975? No. To us, that war was just a semicolon, a very short chapter in a 4,000-year epic." That sentence felt like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. A semicolon? The war that haunted my father's generation, that cost billions of dollars and countless lives, was just a semicolon? "Tomorrow," Hung continued, "cancel your morning meeting. I will take you to a place where you can see just how small that semicolon really is." The next morning, the car took us to Tung Long Avenue. I had expected a small building displaying a few shell casings, but looming before my eyes was the 45-meter-high Victory Tower at the new Vietnam Military History Museum. It was colossal, modern, and overwhelming. I walked into the main hall, my eyes scanning for Chinook helicopters or M48 tanks, things familiar to an American like me. But Professor Hung pulled me past them. He led me back to the beginning. We stood before the bronze arrows of Ko Loa and the massive wooden stakes of Bac Dang. "Look, Mark," Hung pointed. "This is the 10th century. That is the 13th century. We defeated the Mongol UN army, the most powerful military in the world at that time, 3 times in a row. Back then, your America didn't even have a name on the map." I walked along the endless corridor of history, the Lý, Tran, Le dynasties succeeding one another. Thousands of years of defending independence. My legs began to tire, but I still hadn't seen the Vietnam War. "Professor," I asked, my voice starting to waver, "our war, where is it?" He pointed toward the far end of the path. "Over there, just a small section at the end of the hall. Mark, you see, you look at the B-52 wreckage and think that defines us. But for us, that was just an incident we had to resolve to protect this 1,000-year flow." Cognitive dissonance hit me hard. The ratio of 20 years versus 4,000 years appeared cruel and clear. I thought I was the main character in their story. It turns out, I was just a fleeting cameo. We didn't stop there. He took me back to the center, into the Temple of Literature. That museum showed you how well we defend our country, he said, as we stood before the 82 doctoral stelae. But this place shows you why we have to defend it. In 1076, we built this university. We honored scholars. These stelae teach that talent is the national vitality. Vietnam's strength does not lie in guns, Mark. It lies in education and culture, the only weapons that never run out of ammo. I reached out, hovering my hand over the air above a stone turtle's head. I recalled the education reports I had skimmed. Vietnamese students outperforming in PISA, ranking top globally in math and science, and having the highest human capital index in their income group. Back then, I thought it was luck. Now I know, it's genetics. I was wrong, Professor, I confessed, my arrogance completely gone. I looked at the tree and saw only the scar on the bark, without seeing the massive roots underneath. Back at the office, I couldn't look at Vietnam the same way anymore. If they possess such deep history and intellect, their approach to the modern world certainly wasn't simple. I called Lam, my risk analyst. Lam, I asked, pointing to the geopolitical map with its intricate connecting lines. How do you do it? Last week you welcomed the US president, this week the Chinese president. Are you walking a tightrope? Lam smiled, the smile of a confident new generation. She tossed a file onto my desk titled Bamboo Diplomacy. Mark, do you think a bamboo tree is afraid of the storm? She asked. Its roots go deep, but its branches are flexible. We don't pick sides, we pick national interest. Look at this, we are the only country with comprehensive strategic partnerships with the US, China, Russia, Japan, and Australia. I flipped through the pages. The numbers danced before my eyes. Vietnam isn't a victim trapped between superpowers. They are a rising middle power, an indispensable link in the global supply chain. The safety and political stability you are investing in, Lam said, referring to the stability attracting FDI, is not accidental. It is a product engineered by diplomatic intellect. We turn a sensitive geographical position into a strategic asset. My head buzzed with admiration. I realized they are master players on the global chessboard. They won the war, and now they are winning the peace with a cool head and a hot heart. That afternoon, I walked onto Long Bien Bridge. The rusty old bridge vibrated intensely as a train rumbled through. They say this bridge was bombed by Americans dozens of times, but the Vietnamese always reconnected it to keep moving forward. Standing amidst the wind of the Red River, I pulled out my phone and called my dad, a US veteran. Dad, I said when I heard his voice, I'm standing in Hanoi. I'm standing in the safest place I've ever known. Safe? Don't they hate us? My dad asked, his voice worried. No, Dad, they have forgiven. Not because they forgot, but because they have a vision that extends 1,000 years beyond ours. They don't look at us as old enemies, but as partners for the future. Dad, I was wrong. I came here as a benefactor, but they are the ones teaching me about resilience. I hung up, my eyes stinging. I opened my voice recorder and sent an urgent memo to the board in New York. To the partners, this is Mark. Tear up the cheap labor exploitation plan. It is an insult. The new strategy is innovation partnership. We will invest in their intellect, in their tech startups, because this country is not an emerging tiger learning to walk. They are a dragon waking up. I looked down at the silt-heavy Red River. The condescension of Wall Street had been washed away by the current. I felt relieved. This morning, I sat at a sidewalk cafe, perched on a low plastic stool. In front of me was an iced brown coffee, no da, and a banh mi, a dish considered one of the best in the world. The street was noisy and chaotic. But in that noise, I no longer heard the echoes of the past. I heard the sound of the future. I saw young people discussing startups, optimistic faces. They are one of the most optimistic nations on Earth. I took a bite of the banh mi and suddenly remembered the quote by historian Mai Elliott. Vietnam is a country, not a war. Exactly. They are not a chapter in American history. They are the authors of their own magnificent history book. War scars only prove they survived. Their actions today define who they are. I stood up and paid the old lady selling the coffee. She smiled brightly, insisting on returning the 2,000 Vietnamese dong change. I took that small bill, cherishing it as a lesson in self-respect and honesty. I'm staying here. not to help, but to learn. To be inspired by a nation that knows how to be flexible like bamboo but never breaks. Vietnam, a country, a future.